I'm beating every N64 game, and I mean all of them. The twist is, the next game I play is randomly selected, so I have no clue what's coming next. This is the journey to beating every N64 game. Hey, welcome to another episode. If you do enjoy this video, consider giving it a like, as it does help the channel a lot. And if you like this series, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. Last time we were driving around with a bad camera, and this time we are, Star Wars, yeah. Game number 47, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Released in 1996, this game was developed by LucasArts and published by Nintendo. So we've got the first Star Wars game here, with there being 4 in total on the console. This was actually one of the earliest games released for the N64, so I think a lot of people may have seen this one. I had personally never seen it at all. If y'all thought it was rough that I've never seen Indiana Jones, then wait till you learn I've never watched any Star Wars movies. Well, not technically true. I watched episode 7 with my friends when it came out because they wanted to see it, but does that one even count? Anyway, the game only has a single player story mode, so that's what we'll beat to complete this game. It opens with the classic Star Wars yellow scrolling text explaining the story. Apparently there's a battle at Hoth. Wherever that is. Darth Vader is obsessed with finding Luke Skywalker, so he's picking a fight. A random freight ship is approached Hoth, and that ship contains our character, Dash Rendar. We land and run into Han Solo and talk about how we like to race each other or whatever. He thinks we might be able to join the Rogue Squadron someday. The first mission has us flying a ship in a gigantic aerial battle on Hoth. The ship flies around in a large 3D arena where at first you just have to blow up basic enemies, nothing too wild. After blowing those up, some AT-STs show up and we have to take those down too. I learned the hard way here that running into an enemy means instant death. These things are a bit tanky, but you just shoot them like you do any other ship. Then after those are done for, the giant AT-ATs show up. The game wants you to use the harpoon and tow cables to tangle up its legs and bring it down. The problem is, it didn't explain how to do this, and despite pressing every button on the controller, no harpoon nor cables came out. Turned out you could only use it when you're really close to the AT-AT. Tying the cable around their legs was very frustrating. I guess this was like an iconic scene from the movies, but man, it is just a pain to do in reality. The game changes camera angles and you fly around like you're an overweight bird that's also drunk. After about 4 loops around its legs, it goes down. And after taking out all the AT-ATs, the mission ends. Each mission has challenge points you can obtain for completing various optional objectives, but you don't have to do them. The first mission, pretty simple honestly. In the next mission, the game does a complete 180 and it's suddenly a third-person shooter. The main thing you do is run around and shoot droid soldiers, or whatever those dudes are called, with a laser gun. From what I've heard of the movies, these guys are supposed to not be able to aim at all, but they sure aim well in this game. You definitely want to take them out immediately, because your health will drop quick. I was running through this first level when I ran into a room with like 3 albino Chewbacca things inside. So naturally I let them out and they came at me. And yeah, this was a horrible idea as it almost killed me in one hit. I did end up dying immediately after though. You're able to die in a mission, but your lives are limited. You start with 4 lives on a fresh load of a game, but you can earn more by gaining challenge points in previous missions. Sometimes you can knock enemies off of a cliff and they'll let out the iconic Wilhelm scream. Hopefully it's the right way. Was that the Wilhelm scream or whatever? It's kind of cool they left that in. Anyway, I just kind of ran through this first area without any strategy and eventually found an elevator that led to the end of stage 1. Each mission is segmented into multiple stages. Your lives only reset at the start of a mission though, not the start of a stage. The next part was more of the same, running through this unnamed structure, killing more bad guys. I got to the top of that structure and there was a room with a bunch of switches. This restored power to the building, so now I had to go to my ship to escape. A quirk with the physics I noticed pretty early on is it seems you move faster when you jump. I think a lot of old games were like this, and it's just funny watching your dude jump around everywhere. I made my way down a long hallway where the floor was cracked for some reason, then to another elevator. In the next room, the boss showed up. It was a standard AT-ST. This was really easy to kill in the last mission, so this should be easy, right? Yeah, nah. Like, dude, that thing took my health down basically instantly. Turns out just being a regular old dude with a tiny pistol isn't nearly as good as piloting an attack ship against one of these. I only had 1 life left at this point, and it wasn't looking good. I found if I ran around the room in a circular pattern, I could dodge all of its fire. However, I needed to be able to hit it. There's a bunch of crates and some ledges up high, so I jumped around on those. Up top, I found my first new weapon, the Seekers. The laser has infinite ammo, but all the other weapons are limited. The Seekers are a much more powerful weapon, but it's still not enough to kill the boss in a few hits or anything like that. I basically had no plan, so I ended up dying and I lost my last life. When you run out of lives, you have to go all the way back to the start of the mission, so before I hit all those switches and turn the power on. It kinda sucks, but at least the second time around you know how to get back to where you were more quickly. The next attempt, I made it to the boss with 3 lives remaining. I had the right idea with running around the room to avoid its fire, but I also needed to be able to shoot it. The best idea I could come up with was to run around in a circle, but much closer to it, so that I could make my way behind it. This allowed me time to get a couple shots off before I had to run again. Each Seeker dealt 2% of its health, then the laser took 6 shots or so to only take down 1%. It took ages to get anywhere with this thing. Thankfully, I figured out you can hold Z to stand still and adjust where you aim, and this boss takes huge damage if you shoot it at the top. This sped the fight up immensely, going from taking 30% of its health in about 4 minutes to finishing the last 70% in about 1 minute. With the ATST down, I made my way back to the ship and took off, completing mission 2. Next mission takes us back to flying in a ship, but it's a much different one. Now we don't control the flying at all, just a big turret on the top. This mission, it's pretty bland. There are 60 TIE fighters in total that you have to destroy. Occasionally, they shoot these green bombs at you that deal huge damage unless you shoot them. After blowing up the TIE fighters, the mission ends. Honestly, this one was kinda boring. Now it's on to part 2 of the storyline. We're on the lookout for Boba Fett as he's trying to free Han Solo and bring him to the gangster Jabba the Hutt. The next mission is when the game starts to actually get difficult. It has us on this flat, high-speed train, and you gotta do some serious platforming over all these bars that extend out. They aren't all that tough to dodge, and hitting one only takes 10% of your health. Seems like it should be a one-hit kill. After a bit of jumping over these, it starts to get more complex with us having to jump between 2 trains. And if you miss any of the jumps, you die instantly. At the very start of the mission, it gives you a warning saying to be careful jumping while the train is turning. I quickly figured out why it said that because it caused me to die. If you jump when the train's going over a turn, it just kind of moves out from under you. Your character will jump as if the train were going straight rather than accounting for the turning. Basically, just don't jump like this at all costs. Even further in, it starts introducing actual train cars, and there's these soldier dudes inside who sound like Chewbacca when they die. Why they sound... Oh god. Why they sound like Chewbacca? Maybe they are Chewbacca. At the end, it had you jump to another train, and the dude on the radio is like, hey, get ready, train's about to crash. Then it shows it having a giant explosion. I thought I'd messed up, but no, I guess that's just how the mission ends. I have no clue how I survived that one. It shows a cutscene with this robot thing saying it's been watching us and won't let us get to Boba Fett or whatever. Time for a boss in this giant junk pile of a room. This boss isn't some giant creature like before, it's just a little robot. It's about our size, but that makes it much more agile. Its main attack is using a rapid fire energy gun on us that deals heavy damage. The Seekers are key here as they can just melt this thing's health. I ran around the room looking for more Seeker ammo and I found a new weapon instead, the flamethrower. Naturally, I wanted to try it out and dude, it's just not good. Like, it deals decent damage, but you have to get right next to the enemy to deal anything. I was at low health with no special ammo left and I was on my last life, and I really didn't want to have to repeat that entire train sequence again, so I just kept running around looking for anything useful. I missed one of my jumps falling into a hole filled with lava. To my surprise, there was a full heal inside. Heck yeah, dude. Now that I was safe, I explored more and found some Seeker ammo. Those took the boss down easy, beating this mission on the first try. Apparently, this robot gave us enough info to know Boba Fett is on the moon-based Gaul, but we're being hunted, so we have to hide in the Smuggler's Gorge. The goal is to get into the observation tower to pinpoint Boba Fett's exact location. So this mission has us going through this big canyon type thing. I guess this is the Smuggler's Gorge. There's not really anything of note in this one for a while. Just running through the canyon, shooting the bad guys, you know? After a while, I came to this big structure where there was a switch that opened the walls. I made my way to the top and it told me I needed a jetpack to reach Boba Fett. Conveniently, there was one sitting right on top. If you played through this game, you probably remember using this thing. Unfortunately for me, I'd never played this game, so I had no idea how this thing worked, and I ran out of fuel almost instantly, falling to my demise. All the way back to the start of the mission I go. It turns out you just have to land, and it starts to recharge the energy automatically. Whoops. The jetpack, honestly, it controls decently given how old this game is. It's just slow and awkward, but it goes exactly where you tell it to. I flew to the other side of the canyon, completing the first part of this mission. So for this next part, we get to keep the jetpack, and it's needed to cross many gaps in the level. Still, nothing too wild in this one at the start. Eventually, there was a large open room with an AT-ST inside. This thing's just considered a regular enemy now. Seems like just an hour ago, I had no clue how to beat this thing, and I was terrified of it. Oh, it was literally an hour ago. After blowing that dude up, I was flying in a large vertical room where there were a bunch of enemies at the top. There's a few instances like this in the game where the enemies have the high ground on you, and it's just brutal. Depending on how you approach it, you can get your entire health taken in seconds. Then I rode this floating platform thing over to a gigantic open room with just lots and lots of enemies inside, and they're all up higher than you, so it's just a rough part. Finally, after flying around for what seemed like forever, I'd reached the location of Boba Fett. This fight, it's kind of interesting because both of us have a jetpack to fly around. Boba Fett generally just flies around the room towards you, and he can shoot both lasers and seekers at you. A problem I was having is since he's so small relative to how big this room is, it was hard to even find him sometimes. I'd just be searching around aimlessly. I had him down to 1% health when I learned he has another attack, a flamethrower. Yeah, rip me, I guess. Thankfully, I still had 1 life left though. I killed him after spawning, and he just flailed around awkwardly into a hole in the center. I thought I'd won, but nope. Time for phase 2. Boba Fett gets into this ship that hovers around the area, and it just constantly shoots lasers. I could avoid the fire by running around the room in a circle, but I couldn't hurt it doing this, just like the AT-ST earlier. This boss, it just has the worst hitbox of all time. I was literally touching it, spamming my laser, and it didn't take any damage. No matter where I aimed, I just never hit it. I died and I was sent all the way back to the start, way before even having the jetpack. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to make it back to the boss, even when you know where to go now. It's kind of brutal how far you get set back. So I slowly made my way back to Boba Fett, killed him again, then phase 2 started. I was just struggling to hit it still, like nothing was working, and that's when the cheese happened. Get wrecked, caught in the infinite. He can't hit me, get wrecked. I have no idea how I did this, but the ship it got stuck directly in my face. And even better, this is where the ship's hitbox was. So I literally just stood there and spammed shooting at it, and it eventually died. I took 0 damage. But after beating the boss, we learned Boba Fett escaped, and now an assassin is trying to kill Luke Skywalker. Princess Leia asked us to follow him to Tatooine to keep him safe. Some bad guys are going to Obi-Wan Kenobi's old house to kill Luke, so we've got to cut them off. So then comes by far the worst part of this game, the driving mission. We're driving a pod bike thing or something. I don't know what it's called, but it goes fast and it is janky. Hit any sort of wall at a bad angle and you just blow up. At first I thought this was a race, but actually you have to kill all the other dudes who are driving. Even if you go top speed without messing up, you'll never catch up to the other people. Only the person furthest back will stay near you. Blowing others up is easy. You just ram their bike with your shoulder and kinda hope they decide to crash. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It just seemed random to me. After a while I finally managed to kill all the other dudes. All I had to do was slowly coast to the end and I'd be fine. Nice and slow now. What the heck? Yeah, apparently I also had to pull the bike up to float over the gap. Didn't know that. First time it's shown up in the level, but whatever. After a few more attempts, I reached the end. After making it to Luke, he says we should board a Black Sun freighter. So we're running around on this freight ship looking for the supercomputer on board. Honestly, this mission is pretty forgetful. It's just another run around and shoot all the bad guys when not really anything of note in it. The boss wasn't even that hard either. It's this big robot that slides around the room pretty slowly, and it occasionally extends one of its hands at you, but it's easy to dodge. Beat this mission first try, nothing too hard in it. So we learn Princess Leia has been captured by the Dark Prince Shizuo. Luke goes into the palace to save Leia while we're assigned to planting explosives all over the sewers to cover their escape. So yeah, now we're walking through the nasty sewer tunnels. At one point there were these monsters or something in the water making this extremely loud growling noise. Enough people considering it not beaten. And they apparently kill you in one hit, so that's cool. I found a key and had to travel underwater through a large tunnel. You can hardly see anything in the water, and not gonna lie, it was kinda scary being in the water, hearing that growling, knowing that if it hit me it would be a one-hit kill. Eventually, I made my way to this room with a giant pool of water, and in that water, there was a big sea monster inside. I can't stress enough how frustrating it is to fight this thing. You're underwater, so you use the jetpack to move around. The visibility is miserable, and its tentacles move around wildly, so it's hard to hit them. If you shoot the tentacles, they do die, but they just instantly respawn, so it's kind of pointless to do. One of the tentacles has an eye on it, which is the boss's weak point. It took 2 tries, but I did eventually kill it. The water in the room drains down, we fly up to the top, completing this mission. So now we're in Shizuo's palace itself. This mission, well, it's just flat out brutal. For one thing, it's really dark, so your visibility's poor. This isn't a problem though if you have the enemy locations memorized, but on your first couple attempts, it's really rough. One problem is this mission introduces these robot enemies which have way more health than any of the regular enemies. The first tough part of the level was this large room with a bunch of these robots. Later on, I learned I could just camp at the entrance to the room and hide behind the door, but it took a while to figure that strat out. This mission also introduced a new weapon, the Disruptor. This is going to be absolutely crucial later on. Then later on there were these rooms with these large moving gears and they damage you heavily if you touch them. The worst part is this tall room where you have to set a bunch of bombs on a pillar. The angle you approach the enemies in this area make it easy for them to get hits off on you without you ever being able to counter it. But all in all, it's not that difficult. However, you'll lose a lot of health here if you're not extremely careful. I got through the level itself on my first try. However, I was nowhere near being done with this mission. The boss here is this big robot called Gladiator. It just kind of walks around slowly and it can shoot a barrage of missiles, use a short-range flamethrower, and send out a large laser. Oh, and it can use all of these at the exact same time. It's not like they're separate attacks. Not only that, it's very tanky. Seekers only take down 1% of its health. This is where that disruptor from earlier comes into play. It sends out a green orb of energy that it deals insane damage. By far the best weapon in the game. With that, I took down the boss first try. Glad I had that. Oh no. Well, that's what I thought. It then switched to phase 2. The floor opens up to create a maze-like area below, and now the Gladiator flies around and sends lasers at you from above. I ended up dying really quick to this, and that was it. Had to do the entire mission all over again. This mission, it's so long too, like it puts Dark Souls runbacks to shame. And there would be a lot of runbacks, enough to where I had this entire level layout memorized and could make it to the boss with all my lives and full HP after a while. This guy is he's a nightmare. He can take your health down to 0 in an instant if you aren't careful. Sure, the Disruptor takes its health down really fast, but it only has 5 shots. And I need to also kill phase 2. On the second attempt, I learned phase 2 is basically just as tanky as phase 1. And since it's flying around, it's much harder to hit. You need to constantly be moving to not just get dropped down to 0 immediately, but it's difficult to be moving and also hit an aerial enemy. After dying like 5 times or so, I decided to try something different. The Disruptor was kinda like a cheap way to kill it, so maybe since phase 2 is so much harder, I could get past phase 1 without using it, then just spam it on phase 2 to defeat the boss without much strategy. So I spammed all my pulse cannon and seeker ammo into it and made it past phase 1. Phase 2 came and I flew in its face and just spammed the Disruptor. I kept dying, but I had just enough lives to make it out safely. Boss was finally dead. Ugh, get out of here. No. No, what? Man, you gotta be kidding me. Like, how does this thing have a third phase? Now it's only the head flying around and it's way harder to hit. I didn't have a chance here as I blew all my lives face tanking on phase 2. It was over immediately. The face tank plan just wasn't going to work, so I needed something different. Phase 1 was so slow that I realized I could continuously run behind it and shoot it with a laser a few times. It would be very, very slow to kill it, but this was a surefire way for me to kill phase 1 without using any ammo or losing any health. Even with that, I just kept dying. Phase 2 was just too much for me, and I was kinda lost on what to do. It felt like nothing was working. On like the 12th attempt or so, a miracle happened. The boss just completely got stuck trying to shoot the laser at me. Sure, it hit me a tiny bit, but it barely hurt from the angle it was at. This was just perfect because now I made it to phase 3 with all my lives intact. I wasn't able to hit phase 3 with the disruptor because it was just too small and I died. But I wasn't that upset. I knew I could recreate that phase 2 scenario, and recreate it I did. Now I had my full pulse cannon for phase 3 and I just annihilated it. Finally, after so many hours, the gladiator was dead and no phase 4. With that done, there was only one mission left between me beating this game, and it was another spaceship one. We're in the large ship manning the turret like in a previous mission, but it's a bit more chaotic. In the end, all you do is shoot enemies over and over just like before. After about 5 minutes of this, it shifts to us piloting the ship. I guess this is Shizuo's base we're flying around. The goal is to destroy all the turrets on the big arms of the base. Nothing too tough. After blowing those up, we have to fly inside the base itself and destroy the power core. So I went to the ends of those arms where the turrets were and flew inside. There's like a challenge of walls you have to avoid in a bunch of different directions, then you shoot a missile into the power core. It has to be done 4 times for each arm. It took like 2 attempts at this mission, but I blew up Shizuo's ship, saving the galaxy. Or something like that. It shows some lore where Luke and Leia are on Tatooine and apparently Dash died in the explosion. But they're like, hey, he helped us so much that at least he didn't die in vain. But then in the biggest twist ever, it turns out Dash survives somehow. He's like in a wormhole or something like that, and since everyone thinks he's dead, no one's gonna come looking for him. And then the credits roll. Game complete. So yeah, there you have it. My journey to beating Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. The game itself wasn't half bad. I'd never played it before this, but I think I'm glad I did. I thought it was a bit weird given how there was a grab bag of missions with the third-person shooter missions, the flying ones, and even the bike. The bike, it just controlled awful and it wasn't fun at all. The rest of the levels though, they're pretty enjoyable. I like the shooter missions the best. It was a pretty easy game with the default difficulty on medium. That is, until that gladiator boss. That thing single-handedly bumped the difficulty up drastically. Thankfully I got it stuck, or who knows what I would have done. The music, it's kinda lacking during gameplay. The graphics, they're below average, but it plays pretty well. I gave it a 6 out of 10 for enjoyability and a 6.5 out of 10 for difficulty. But yeah, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you did enjoy the video, consider giving it a like as it does help the channel a lot. And if you like this series, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. But yeah, thanks for watching, and here's a sneak peek at what is coming next. So there are 344 left, plus the 3 that's not on the list. Could be anything, even Zor Maju Sukai Densetsu. But probably won't be. 3, 2, 1, go. 201, what's that? Oh shoot, we are playing NBA Jam 99. That should actually be pretty fun.